Hello and welcome to Cycles of Time, your weekly guide to what's happening on Earth as we make our revolutionary journey around the sun. For time immemorial, our human ancestors have created myths and meanings to help us adapt and thrive as seasons change. Join me each week to explore the intersections of these ancient cycles, from the indigenous medicine wheel to the pagan wheel of the year, the Babylonian and Greek zodiac to the I Ching, the ancient Chinese book of changes. I'm your host, Alison Dale, and this is the Cycles of Time podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to another week in the Cycle of Time, this ongoing project where I deep dive into ancient stories about the changing seasons as the Earth revolves around the sun, and likewise as the sun revolves around the zodiac. On this week's episode, we're celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day here in the U.S. on Monday, the sun's transit through human design gate 32, which is known as the gate of continuity throughout the week, and a full supermoon in Aries on Thursday, which will be located across the sky from the sun in the gate of growth. That's gate 42. The U.S. Indigenous Peoples Day is celebrated on the second Monday of October every year, and so it's on October 14th this year when this episode is coming out, and it is in honor of the cultures and histories of people indigenous to Turtle Island, to this place known as the United States currently. Like Earth Day and Mother's Day, I truly believe that every day should be recognized as Indigenous Peoples Day, but it is truly also so important to shift the cultural narrative on the day that I grew up getting school off for Christopher Columbus Day. So I'm happy about this shift. All of the cycles of time that I study and report about in this podcast are stories of indigenous wisdom traditions, from the North American and Siberian medicine wheel to the ancient Taoist Wuxing cycle to the Babylonian and Greek zodiac to the ancient Chinese I Ching. I've loved doing this podcast because it's always allowed me to open up to receiving these stories from around the world. And these are all stories that tell the tales of the changing seasons and give deep insights on how to adapt and co-evolve with the natural world around us. So I feel like the Cycles of Time stories are indigenous stories in many ways, and I'm so glad to have the ability to process them through living with the seasons in this way. It's gotten me so much closer to a lot of the stories that I've heard from a lot of different cultures around the world that are indigenous to the natural world around them and not too separated from that. And so we'll get into that a little bit today. For me, for the past few weeks, I've had some really catchy pop tune jingles in my head from a kids' TV show. And this normally, when this happens, is not such a good thing. It can definitely be like the most annoying thing, actually. But I'm feeling lucky at this moment in time because my 5-year-old daughter's favorite show currently is called Spirit Rangers. And the songs from the show have such powerful, endearing lyrics. Spirit Rangers is an Emmy-nominated animated Netflix kids TV show, which is created by Carissa Valencia, and she is a member of the Santa Ynez Band of the Chumash Nation in current-day California. She basically created the show of her dreams, the show that she wanted as a child as she was longing for representation on TV and in the media. And the series of Spirit Rangers was originally released on October 10th, 2022, which was right before Indigenous Peoples Day a couple years ago. So my daughter was kind of into superhero show. She had learned about superheroes at school, and she begged to watch Marvel and Spidey and PJ Masks and some of these kind of popular kids superhero shows. But we found Spirit Rangers instead, and for that I'm so grateful. It's a really, really good show for those of you who have kids, or if you don't, it's also, I just really love it. It's a beautiful animation and songs and just beautiful messages as well. The show centers on the Chumash and Cowlitz siblings named Cody, Summer, and Eddie Skycedar, and these kids have the power to teleport into a magical spirit dimension in their California National Park. And in the spirit realm, Cody is a grizzly bear cub or a stingray. They have land and ocean spirits. Summer's a red-tailed hawk or an octopus, and Eddie is a turtle or an orca. And their mom and dad also have powers, and that's what I love about this, because every superhero show that I've ever seen is like hidden from the people close to us, but in this show it's a connection through ancestral lines. And so their mom transforms into a bear and their dad can transform into a tree. And they've passed these necklaces called Dia necklaces to the kids, and let them kind of discover what the spirits are that come out of them. And the kids don't know that the parents had that ability as well, but they come together in one of the early episodes, and it's this beautiful kind of passing down through the lineage that's so relevant to the gate of continuity that we're in today. So the series, is just constantly in my head, so I'm always thinking about it. We don't even watch much TV at my house, but this show, we do listen to the music, and my daughter knows every word, and I'm starting to as well, and I just love singing along with them. And the writer's room in the production of this series was staffed entirely by Indigenous Americans. The founder of the show, Valencia, also consulted Chumash and Cowlitz tribes around the continent, and each show is directed by an Indigenous American director, and the voice actors for all of the characters are also Indigenous people. The episodes are super funny, and they're action-packed, and also have incredible lessons about learning from our elders, respecting our interconnections with nature, and cooperating rather than competing. So I just had to jump into that because it's Indigenous Peoples Day, and it's a beautiful, really widely accepted. It has 3 seasons now, this show, and I highly recommend it. My favorite song from season 3 is called We Are One, Only Take What You Need. And it is perfect for this week of continuity in human design. We're in gate 32, which is the gate of continuity. And that goes along really well with Indigenous Peoples Day, because it's kind of all about taking things from the past and bowing to them in reverence and paying veneration to things from our past that can carry us towards a better future. And so this song is sung by Mother Bear to a troublemaking trickster trio, a raccoon, rabbit, and a raven, who are taking more than they need from the earth. And so the song's lyrics say, "We are one with the earth around. If we show her love, she will treat us well. 'Cause plants are relatives, respect the medicine, and only take what you need. Our cousins are the sage and the trees. If we show them love, they can heal a bear sneeze. 'Cause plants are relatives, respect the medicine, and only take what you need." It's really sweet to sing this along with my daughter and watch her kind of grok and understand and remind me sometimes about this message. So super awesome. Check out Spirit Rangers if you haven't. And moving on to the forecast. This week, in the Cycles of Time, the highlights are today, Monday, October 14th, Indigenous Peoples Day in the United States. Thursday, October 17th, there's a full moon in Aries in Human Design Gate 42, the Gate of Growth. And in the Human Design and I Ching wheel, the sun is transiting from today through Saturday through Gate 32, the Gate of Continuity. On Sunday, the sun will transit into Gate 50, the Gate of Values, and so we're going to talk about that more next week. This week's themes are balancing continuity and perseverance with growth and forward movement, and veneration for the ancestors who came before us. Our place in the Wheel of the Year is we're in the Medicine Wheel direction west, which represents water and adulthood and emotionality in the version of the Medicine Wheel that I've studied. The whooshing cycle element is metal, representing autumn and coming between earth and water. The pagan season is Mabon, and we're on our way towards Samhain, Halloween time coming up soon. The moon phase is a full moon in Aries, which is our first full moon out of eclipse season, and it's just barely not an eclipse, so it's still pretty powerful full moon this week. And then in the I Ching, as I mentioned, the gate of continuity, which is thunder over wind or permanence in the I Ching, and then we're moving into the cauldron or the gate of values on Sunday. So for Monday through Saturday, the gate of continuity and how it ties into Indigenous wisdom is really been a deep theme. So today, Monday, I'm going to be attending a powwow on the Santa Fe Plaza to pay reverence to the many tribal nations that originally called this place known as New Mexico home. This includes the Tewa, Dene, Ute, and Pueblos people, amongst many other peoples who live in the area now. And it'll be it's only started happening, this powwow, very recently on the Santa Fe Plaza, and so I'm really excited to check it out. It's only been a few years since it's been going on, and so I'm just really heartened by the fact that there seem to be many more official celebrations of this day than when I was growing up, and because we just have so much to learn from people native to the lands that we currently reside on, who have maintained a connection with their Indigenous roots, a continuity across time with the past, with the land, with the animals, with the skies, with the waters. And I'm just so honored and humbled to be able to learn and be taught by people with such deep and profound wisdom that is so needed in the world right now. So I am grateful and reverent every day, not just today. But when it comes to today, Indigenous Peoples Day was instituted in 1992, and that was set to coincide with the 500th anniversary of the arrival of Columbus in the Americas on October 12th, 1492. In 2014, many other cities and states adopted the holiday, but it wasn't until 2021, only 3 years ago, that the holiday was formally commemorated with a presidential proclamation by Joe Biden. So I read a little history of this holiday from Wikipedia, and I'm sure there's better sources, but Wikipedia is all right. And so I found this pretty fascinating. I have a background in the Bay Area, and so this was a lot of interesting happenings in the Bay Area, starting in the 70s and through the 90s. So I'll just read it to you super quick because it's super interesting and worth knowing. So in 1977, the International Conference on Discrimination Against Indigenous Populations in the Americas, which was sponsored by the United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland, began to discuss replacing Columbus Day in the Americas with a celebration to be known as Indigenous Peoples Day. So that was 1977. And similarly, Native American groups staged a sort of protest in Boston instead of Thanksgiving, which has been celebrated there to mark collaboration between Massachusetts colonists and Native Americans in the first years. In July 1990, at the First Continental Conference on 500 Years of Indian Resistance in Quito, Ecuador, representatives of Indigenous people throughout the Americas agreed that they would mark 1992, the 500th anniversary of the first of the voyages of Christopher Columbus, as a year to promote, quote, continental unity and, quote, liberation. After the conference, attendees from Northern California organized protests against the Quincentennial Jubilee that had been organized by the U.S. Congress for the San Francisco Bay Area on Columbus Day in 1992. So that Quincentennial Jubilee, organized by Congress, was supposed to include replicas of Columbus's ship sailing under the Golden Gate Bridge and reenacting their quote-unquote discovery of America. The delegates formed the Bay Area Indian Alliance and, in turn, the Resistance 500 Task Force. It promoted the idea that Columbus's discovery of inhabited lands and the subsequent European colonization of them had resulted in the genocide of thousands of Indigenous people because of the decisions which were made by colonial and national governments. In 1992, a group convinced the City Council of Berkeley, California, to declare October 12th as a day of solidarity with Indigenous people, and 1992 as the Year of Indigenous People. The city implemented related programs in schools, libraries, and museums, and the city of Berkeley symbolically renamed Columbus Day as Indigenous Peoples Day, beginning in 1992 to protest the historical conquest of North America by Europeans and to call attention to the losses suffered by the Native American peoples and their cultures through diseases, warfare, massacres, and forced assimilation. Get Lost Again, Columbus, an opera by a Native American composer, White Cloud Wolfhawk, was produced that day. Berkeley has celebrated Indigenous Peoples Day ever since. Beginning in 1993, Berkeley also had an annual powwow and festival on Indigenous Peoples Day. And then in the years following Berkeley's action, other local governments and institutions have either renamed or canceled Columbus Day, either to celebrate Native American history and cultures, to avoid celebrating Columbus and the European colonization of the Americas, or due to raise controversy over the legacy of Columbus. Several other California cities now celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day and encourage people to donate to a neighboring tribe and recognize the trauma and pain Indigenous peoples have been subjected to by colonizers. So that is the history of Indigenous Peoples Day. Not that long ago, but 92 was quite a ways. And just considering it was, only a couple years ago that it got a proclamation by the federal government. So let's keep moving in this direction, eh? If you'd like to find out the Indigenous land that you currently reside within, you can type in your address at https native-land.ca. This is an organization whose mission is to improve the relationship of people, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, with the land around them and with the real history and sacredness of that land. So this involves acknowledging and righting the wrongs of history, and also involves a personal journey through the importance of connecting with the earth, its creatures, and its teachings. So that's from native-land.ca. Check it out if you haven't. It's an amazing map. There's obviously not distinct and firm boundaries between regions where people were indigenous to or are indigenous to, but there is a beautiful way that the different cultures are overlaid on this map, and they do a really good job. And from there, you can learn where to make donations and where to pay a land tax or a retribution to the people who live where you currently reside. It's definitely worth looking into. So as far as the cycles of time go, and this week's forecast, I find it super fascinating that Indigenous Peoples Day is falling when the sun is transiting through the gate of continuity, gate 32. It seems like such a perfect synchronicity, as in the Gene Keys book, gate 32, or key 32, is referenced as ancestral reverence. In the original I Ching, hexagram 32 is known as thunder over wind, also known in various sources as permanence, duration, holding firm, and constancy. Embodied in Gate 32 is the idea that although things come to a conclusion, there remains a quality that is endearing. Thunder and wind are the forces which contribute to the continual movement and renewal of nature. A torrential storm can pass through a landscape, but what is firm will not only remain, it will be strengthened. These forces are connected to the movement of the heavens and the turning of the seasons. So thunder and wind are both very powerful trigrams. And I love that notion that, the continual movement and renewal it is something to pay reverence to. And the way we can do that in the human realm is by paying reverence to our ancestors and to the people who have come before us and tended the land where we live before us. I've talked a lot in many episodes of this podcast about the Octavia Butler quote that the only constant is change. God is change. Things are always changing, right? But so this gate is recognizing that change is a constant, but really focusing on the idea that there is also a certain permanence and constancy and commitment that gives durability to the changes over time. And that comes from pulling from the past so that we can go into the future. Nature is composed of phenomenon that arises from the unseen or hidden movement of something deeper. Thunder is the explosive sound of expanding air when heated by lightning. Wind is the movement of air when hot and cold pressure systems collide. Although you cannot see the greater force, you can observe its effects in what unfolds. This is how a commitment or trust in the way gives durability to that which is to come. So that is a quote from Café au Sol, who writes about the I Ching. And they're really emphasizing the, kind of unseen forces of the past, or of something that is not necessarily visible in the results, but something that is there to give rise to a result and give rise to a future manifestation. So that's something to pay attention to this week. Where are your ideas coming from? Where are your feelings coming from? Tapping into the depth of relationality that we have, not only across space, but across time. So that's a huge focus of this week. The image, when I was reading the Gene Keys, the image that I drew from the Gene Keys reading of 32 is kind of a grafting of a new plant onto an old root. A fresh, vital shoot is grafted onto an old, strong, mature root. And this action of grafting in the botanical world is the essence of preservation as well as veneration, where we're paying respect to the old, the roots, so that we can create the new from something strong and wise. And so these are the gift and siddhi levels of the Gene Keys, preservation and veneration as well. Jesse Chestnut of Keys of the I Ching writes that the old root runs deep and is well established, and the fresh shoot brings new vigor and life to the equation. The root is a metaphor of the old ways, indigenous wisdom, the mystery traditions, ancestral strength, and ancient myths. The new shoot is of the now as it grows into the future. By connecting these two forces in the present, we may preserve the power and rootedness of the old and add new life so that it may grow strong into the future. This gift knows what to prune, the gift of preservation, knows what to prune, what to weed out completely, and what to nurture and cultivate. The gate is expressed beautifully by the image of grafting, old rootstock with a new shoot. Ancient roots and traditions that draw through strength and nutrient grafted onto the present fresh vitality of a new shoot. We have such an opportunity to ground our modern technology into the ancient ways which have almost been lost to time and persecution. It is up to us to graft the ancient past into the distant future in the present moment. In this way, we preserve the divine and natural beauty, which is a return to the earth, to Eden. So 32 in the Gene Keys is the shadow of failure, the gift of preservation, and the siddhi of veneration. And so that's why I titled this episode Indigenous Veneration. And so going back to the shadow level of the Gene Keys, of the gate of continuity, we find the word failure. And I've been making these cards, which I've been posting on Instagram, and I'll post in my Substack as well. But they're just cards that kind of contain all of the information that I'm talking about every week in the cycles of time for each one of these 64 gates of the I Ching. And I do on one side the shadow level, and then the other side the gift level, just as an easy mnemonic way to kind of, in an embodied way, see what it feels like to flip something from one word to another and have them carry the same energy. So failure, flipping over to preservation, is what the motion is here. And failure, this could bring a lot up this week about fear and uncertainty about the future, and a certain paralysis about that fear and uncertainty about the future. That feels to me kind of spot on. And as we approach the elections and this spooky season, and just all of the natural disasters and man-made disasters that I went into depth about last week, and continue to think about every single day and every single moment of just, the amount of suffering that there is. But what is that a failure of, right? I think that the gift of 32 is preservation, where we learn to honor the wisdom of the past and also learn about the resilience that has gotten us to this place from the past. A lot of decisions were made by all of our ancestors so that we could get here today. And they're not necessarily the same decisions that we need to make today. Some people had to be silent and not use their voices in the past in order to get to this place today. But we're in a moment of using our voices, and I keep seeing memes about that circulating everywhere I look, and people talking about that, about just, we're in such a critical time that it is time to embrace our voices and our creativity and our creations and not hold back amidst all of the things that are happening in the world. It's not the time to sit back and just let things flow over. But I digress. The journey through these failure to preservation to veneration culminates in the siddhi of veneration, where deep respect for all life and the interconnectedness of existence is realized. So in the Gene Keys, they reference the fact that failure in ancient times, not even ancient, but, early human times, referred to a lack of connection to our people and our communities and our tribes, as this isolation or lack of connection meant certain death when we were living in small groups and when we were not insulated from the rawness of nature beyond anything besides our group, our social group. And in modern times, I'd say failure is most often associated with a lack of success, and success can be defined in many ways, but I would say that the main one, the lack of success, is measured by a lack of money and the lack of accumulation of money. And by achieving a lot of monetary success in this world, some people have been able to insulate themselves from the pains of feeling disconnected from the past and disconnected from the tribe and disconnected from the community. And they go into this a bit in the Gene Keys book, which I found very fascinating, talking about failure as, what is your definition of failure? Anybody out there listening? I'm curious what that means for you. For me, it definitely does, it does go to something not working out the way you anticipate, but failure in life, without getting too deep, kind of the immediate thing that I think of is money, which is so unfortunate. And Richard Rudd in the Gene Keys does talk about that being a pretty common phenomena across the board, because money is the thing that allows us to feel kind of insulated from any kind of threats. But as we know, money can't buy the most important things, and it definitely cannot buy us a connection to our ancestors, a connection to people, and those are the things that are rising to the top at this moment in time about what really matters. And I think a lot of us are starting to think about where our attention is going and what type of how we're prioritizing our energy out in the world. And for me, it's definitely been a big realization of like, oh my gosh, I'm constantly afraid of not having enough, or just scarcity, right? There's a huge scarcity complexes in our culture that have been driven into us by the powers that be in a lot of ways of kind of, selling the world of capitalism, saying that we will always need more to be able to get more. And it turns into this fear of this unsafety if we don't have certain excess, or knowing that a lot of more is coming in. But I think a lot of people in the world right now, myself included, are really flipping the script on that a lot. And it takes a bit to change that narrative from like, oh, if I just keep getting straight A's and getting into the right school and, getting into the right community and getting the right job and getting the right paycheck, then everything will be okay. And it's really, that's starting to dissolve. That's one of these myths with Pluto moving out of Capricorn that I think is really starting to dissolve in a lot of people's subconscious, and the recognition that we need our groups, we need to not be isolated, we need our communities more than ever, and we need connection to values from the past, so that we can move towards a better future. So, on a deeper level, failure continues to be measured by our ability to connect with our people throughout time and to feel a sense of continuity over the course of many cycles. This shadow of failure here can only be healed by putting energy toward the preservation and veneration of the lessons passed along from our ancestors who are deeply connected to the earth, to a sense of place, to a sense of peace, and to their past, and therefore also to their future. So another favorite song of mine from the Spirit Rangers show goes like this. It says, "You gotta respect the traditions that we're told. If you don't understand, ask an elder you know. It's a beautiful thing to share the wisdom our culture brings and learn what the traditions mean. Just like a dance or your favorite song, it was taught, learned, and passed on. It's a beautiful thing to share the wisdom our culture brings." And I wish I wanted to sing right now, because I'm singing these all the time in my head and just not really feeling it. But you can listen. I'll post on the Substack a little video of all of the songs from Spirit Ranger Season 3 to get a gist of these songs. They're really nice ones to have in your head, because they're just such good, very simple and seemingly basic but so profound messages that are so much better than another superhero jingle that I can think of. So like I mentioned earlier, all of the systems that are spoken of within the cycles of time can be traced back to Indigenous peoples as stories of their interconnections with the seasons and the planets and the natural world. And I truly appreciate that there are an increasing number of beautiful offerings these days that can help all of us connect to our ancestry, and not just, going out to witness and pay reverence to peoples who do have more of a longitudinal connection to their ancestry, to the land, to the past. I think as many so-called white people, especially in the United States, don't have a connection to their land or their roots or their ancestors or their indigeneity. And so oftentimes we seek out these things from other cultures and peoples, and this often takes the form of cultural appropriation and just not having a depth of understanding. And I think that in 2020 there was, with everything that happened with George Floyd and with an attention to race in a huge way in this country, there were a lot of organizations and coaches and groups that came together to kind of deepen the connection that so-called white people have with their own ancestry, because there is no such thing as white. That is an invented concept, and just as much as black is an invented concept. It's not a cultural concept. It's not traced back for many years at all, and it's definitely a thing, but it's an invented thing, and I'll get into that in a minute. But I have seen a lot of different groups rise up to address the problem that came about of a lot of white people kind of looking at themselves in the mirror and their ancestors and their history, and feeling a lot of guilt and feeling a lot of shame, and then asking a lot of Indigenous people and Black people and people who were suffering and going through a lot of acute trauma at that time as a group of people, and asking for them to do more work, to answer a lot of questions about the best way to be, and to hold space for them, and to, hold them through tears and through a lot of processing. And so a lot of white people, so-called white people that I know and I'm in kind of community with, have put together offerings to help people uncover the roots of these questions, and like what is a part of that shame and that guilt, as well as looking at, the pain that a lot of so-called white people feel by having a distinct lack of connection to their own ancestry and to their own indigeneity and their own connection to the earth and the land. And so I'm really just happy to see these coming up, and I've taken part in a few of them. I did an art class with Jen Bloomer about raising anti-racist kids that was, just about doing art projects with young children that address a lot of this kind of who are we as people without using racist terminology and without kind of having an implicit bias. And so that was one that I really enjoyed, and I'll post that in the show notes, as well as a few other offerings that I'm aware of that are currently happening or happening on an ongoing basis, and about getting in touch with our ancestry. For all peoples. Ultimately, I'm just really glad that this work is happening. I'm really, really happy about it and would love to continue to do more. I was inspired last year to do a book project called Storyworth. It's a company that will send questions to your elders about, or whoever you want, really. This was a Mother's Day gift that I gave to my grandmother, who's about to turn 99. And it was a question every week, just about her ancestor, her own, connection to the past, as well as her life and her favorite things, and just a book about her. And it was a really fun way to learn a lot, and kind of put it on her own terms. It was an automated process, and it was super wonderful to, now I have a book that I can reprint and distribute to my relatives, about my grandmother's life, from her mouth and from her point of view. And also, a lot is in there about her connection to her past. She's Swiss German originally, or her ancestors are Swiss German. And so it was really cool to learn more about that through this project. So that's called Storyworth. There's just a wealth of things out there that can help us connect to something that was lost for a really long time, purposefully kind of disconnected from our pasts. And, Indigenous is defined as originating, growing, or produced in a certain place or region, and the synonym is native. And with that definition, we all are Indigenous to somewhere, to many places, to somewheres. We all have indigeneity within us, but many of us are just so caught off from our continuity to that place, from a connection to that place, that we don't know where to begin to reconnect with it or reconnect with them, with the people. But none of us are white. In truth, we all have regions and places and lands where our ancestors grew out of and originated from. And, the term whiteness itself, we could see as a failure of continuity and a failure of connection. And that's bringing in words that I've just been talking about with the I Ching and the Gene Keys for Gate 32, failure and continuity. So this brings both of those in there. We have certain labels like white or black, or kind of generalizing labels. What those are doing is, a failure of continuity to truths and realness from our past, from our indigeneity, from the places where we originated and grew from. And by realizing that whiteness does not exist and is actually a made-up concept that has resulted in many social privileges, as well as inherently many pains and losses through that disconnection from our ancestry and our history and our meaning, we can reconnect with our roots in a more authentic way if we just recognize that it is not real. And I think reconnecting with our roots in that authentic way is incredibly necessary for personal and collective healing and liberation as we go towards the future. James Baldwin, who's one of my favorite thinkers and writers, he was alive from 1924 to 1987 and wrote a lot during the Civil Rights Movement. He's known as the greatest expert on white consciousness in the 20th century United States. And Baldwin states that no one was white before he or she came to America. It took generations and a vast amount of coercion before this became a white country. In his essay on Being White and Other Lies, Baldwin writes that European immigrants had the choice to become white when they reached American shores. Before that, they were known by their nationality or ethnic group, and their indigeneity ultimately, not by their whiteness. America became white, and the people who, as they claim, settled the country became white because of the necessity of denying the black presence and justifying the black subjugation. Whiteness is a dangerous concept, he writes. It's not about skin color. It's not even about race. It's about the willful blindness used to justify white supremacy. It's about using moral rhetoric to defend exploitation, racism, murder, reigns of terror, and the crimes of empire. He goes on, the American Negro has the great advantage of having never believed the collection of myths to which white Americans cling, that their ancestors were all freedom-loving heroes, that they were born in the greatest country the world has ever seen, or that Americans are invincible in battle and wise in peace, that Americans have always dealt honorably with Mexicans and Indians and all neighbors or inferiors, that American men are the world's most direct and virile, that American women are pure, Baldwin wrote. Negroes know far more about white Americans than that. It can almost be said, in fact, that they know about white Americans, what parents, or anyway mothers, know about their children, and that they very often regard white Americans that way. And perhaps this attitude, held in spite of what they know and have endured, helps to explain why Negroes, on the whole, and until lately, have allowed themselves to feel so little hatred. The tendency has really been, insofar as this was possible, to dismiss white people as the slightly mad victims of their own brainwashing. So that's some powerful stuff right there. Some loud claims. I think he's brilliant, the way he writes and just assesses the culture from this kind of meta level of, how people are telling themselves what they want to hear and creating their own narratives in this country. And, America was founded on the genocidal slaughter of Indigenous people and the Holocaust of slavery. And it was also founded on an imagined moral superiority and purity. The fact that dominance of others came and still comes from unrestrained acts of violence is washed out of the national narrative. The steadfast failure to face the truth, Baldwin warned, perpetuates a kind of collective psychosis. Unable to face the truth, white Americans stunt and destroy their capacity for self-reflection and self-criticism. They construct a world of dangerous, self-serving fantasy. Those who imbibe the myth of whiteness externalize evil, their own evil, onto their victims. Racism, Baldwin understood, is driven by moral bankruptcy, narcissism, and inner loneliness and latent guilt. In his essays, Baldwin hits on the societal failure by those who make the choice to replace their ancestral connection, their continuity with the past, with a label like white that inherently puts them outside of history and falsely above others. For me, I see the gate of continuity deeply evoked by this, as it contrasts the deep power and beauty of cultural preservation, veneration, and interconnection, with the short-sighted failure to continue our lineages through time, simply by deciding to embrace the false dichotomy of white versus black. So Baldwin's essentially saying in a lot of his writings that there was a choice that was made that was a direct benefit to assimilate into a group called white, because it was able to then be against something like blackness, like indigeneity, that was easy to then impose the problems, any problem that would come up onto that other. Is a really good way of othering by becoming white, instead of being Swiss or Norwegian or Irish or German or a combination thereof. At this point in American history, this collective failure of facing the truth that perpetuated itself since the early days of this nation is definitely having a bright spotlight shined upon it. And that's right in line with the Pluto return that I talked a little about last week. And Pluto just went direct in Capricorn last Friday. And so we are in the beginning of that like last hurrah of the Pluto return of the United States, where a lot of what I'm talking about right now has been coming up since, around 2020, a little bit before that. It's been this huge influx of attention being paid to, what does this even mean? What does it mean to be white? What does blackness mean? What does indigeneity mean? How can we reconcile these labels that are completely biased and contain so much privilege and so much pain as well? So on this Indigenous Peoples Day, I am personally vowing to first pay reverence and spend time venerating the people who are indigenous to the land where I was born, the land that I call home, and do as much as I can to pay homage to the people who have been here for a very long time and maintain a beautiful continuity to this land and this place. And secondly, I'm vowing to reconnect with my own indigeneity, with my own connection to my ancestors and the lands that they came from, the recipes they cooked with, the plants and animals that they had relationships with, the way they viewed the stars and the seasons and the cycles of time. It's not always easy to access this information because, again, so much of it was systematically eradicated to appear more white, to belong, right? I remember, a lot of people that are in my living history, my grandmother was not able to, they didn't speak German in the house, Swiss German, because they wanted to only speak English. It was, and so many people changed their last names in order for them to seem more white. And so much was lost during that process of in Brazil, they call it branquificação, which is like whiteification, which, it's happened all over the place in places with colonial histories, but America is a huge culprit in that. And so I just want to take this day to appreciate the peoples that are indigenous to what is now known as the United States of America, to Turtle Island, and also to just start thinking about which ways I could connect deeper with my own sense of continuity to the past. So there's less of a temptation to try to get that type of feeling, that type of meaning and sensation from elsewhere. Because appreciation is one thing, and I think it's beautiful to be in a so-called melting pot in some ways where we can have the access to appreciate lots of different cultures and backgrounds, but there's also a certain amount of, as we get closer, like further and further into late stage capitalism, there's a deeper and deeper desire to connect with something that is truly meaningful and that spans across time. And when we come up with a loss or an inability to find that, it becomes really easy to want to kind of take that without really knowing the etiquette or the how to respect learning about it from other places. And I will be the first to admit that I'm probably guilty of that within this very podcast. And I'm always open to feedback and conversations on how I could do better. Again, not to put any extra work on anyone out there that is listening. I'm trying to do my own work, but really, it's an important thing to look at the nuance. I was actually reached out at one point. I have this cycles of time diagram that is a lot of these intersecting wheels, and I had used a medicine wheel diagram that contains some sacred herbs from indigenous American cultures. And someone reached out to me on Instagram and asked that I remove that because they said that the other parts of the medicine wheel, like the directions and the associations with the stages of life and the different kind of emotional, physical, spiritual states of being, as well as the elements, were fairly universal and not super specific necessarily. They kind of cross-cultural in a lot of ways, but that these sacred herbs that I had listed were very specific and had a very specific teachings that needed to go along with them. And so I definitely removed that right away and was super grateful for that feedback. So again, it's easy to walk on thin ice around this, and speaking about any of this all feels a bit intimidating and scary, honestly, about what can we say, and am I going to make a mistake, and is this going to be wrong? But I think that I'm much more willing to risk being wrong if I know that I can be corrected and that I am willing to be corrected. And so thank you for that, and continuing to do that, to have a reciprocity of information and respect across these various traditions that we're talking about here. So, if you'd like to do any of the work that I'm talking about, as well, as far as connecting with your own ancestry, with your own culture, with your own indigeneity, in order to, move forward without that feeling of separation and cutoffness, I've already listed a couple of offerings earlier in the podcast, but I'll post a couple more as well in the show notes and on Substack. One of the organizations that I know a lot of people have worked with is called White Awake, and they have a lot of courses that seem really, really beneficial about digging into our lines of continuity to our pasts, and being able to investigate that in an environment where a lot of people are coming from a similar approach and curious about it, maybe feeling a little bit of guilt or shame, and wanting to be able to have a space to process these feelings that come up when looking into our pasts, for better or for worse, right? Another one of the courses that is being offered, it actually started yesterday, and I think they're full, but they might have another space. It's a new friend of mine named Rachel Simon Stark. She's a writer, and she also leads facilitates a group called Cultivating Culture, and it's a 9-week online course on ancestral repair, reclamation, and renewal. So it just started yesterday, but check out the link for future reference or to inquire about any open spots. And the Cultivating Culture intensive has such a beautiful description that I just like to read it to you, because it hits on a lot of the things that I've been talking about today. And I just thought it was really well written. So if you're listening, Rachel, thank you for putting this together. And I'm hoping to either partake in this cohort or the next one. But basically she says, what does it mean to be human? To spring forth from ancient and enduring lineages, known and unknown. What does it mean to know that this breath, yes, this one, pause, notice your inhale, let it deepen into a long, slow exhale. This breath is an outcome of countless beings that conspired for your survival and arrival to this precise moment, here and now. As these words meet your eyes and digest through the miraculous mechanisms of your mind, settling into your tissues and bones. To be alive is to be a vessel for infinite wisdom and intelligence encoded into your DNA through the many lifetimes lived before you. You, singular, sacred, integral thread in the fabric of human existence. I really love that phrase, integral thread in the fabric of human existence. That is gate of continuity right there. That's what we're talking about this week. That's what this week is all about. And then she goes on, what does it mean to forget ourselves, to become lost to or severed from the magic and medicine of our ancestry as something both past and still living? What does it mean to be separated from the grand story humanity is writing? The cacophonous and all-consuming forces of systemic and structural oppression drown out the whispers of our unique cultural inheritances that knew how to live in solidarity and cherish diversity. These forces break the sacred, inherent bonds woven between all beings and deny the truth that our well-being, our freedom, and our thrival is bound up with each other's. The art of finding and remembering ourselves is a vital component of reclaiming ourselves as active participants in the shaping of more possible collective futures. As we position ourselves in the truth of our stories, we come closer to our common humanity, a critical step towards dismantling all that aims to divide and oppress. Through this work, we responsibly release systems of separation and rebuild broken solidarity to nourish the seeds of collective liberation. So beautifully said. Rachel Simon Stark, just beautifully, beautifully written. It kind of sums up this gate of continuity. It's, veneration, it's preservation. It is not failing to see the connection of that thread into how we all tell the story of humanity together. And on her website, she also has a few extra quotes that I just wanted to reference here because they were so good, and some that I'd read before and some that I hadn't. But first, I was really moved to see James Baldwin because I had written about him before looking at the site, and there he was right there. And he says that not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. So that's kind of an invitation to walk down that path, as we talked about a couple weeks ago, that deep well that looks scary when you don't know where the bottom is, but that idea that we can look deep into that well and find gold. That's kind of where we're at right now in our cultural history. There was another quote by the wonderful poet and activist Lila June, who I've heard speak many times, and she's just a really amazing person. She's of both Indigenous Taos Pueblo and European descent. And Lila June says, "I want to acknowledge that some of the first Indigenous peoples that were forced into hiding were the medicine women of old Europe. Let us reclaim our earth selves, no matter what race you are, and do it soon. The earth may depend on it." So when I've heard her speak in the past, I heard her speak at a festival in California, and it was definitely calling on a lot of the so-called white people in the crowd at this festival to recognize their own indigeneity and how a lot of people, the witch wound, for example, a lot of people in old Europe were sent into hiding for their beliefs. And the medicine women were the witches. And so here I've been wearing a witch hat around the house because we pulled out our Halloween decorations, but I definitely identify as a witch in that way of looking at the earth, paying reverence to the earth and the land and the continuity of expression and how we interconnect with it over time. So that's a beautiful quote by Lila June. And then finally, she had a quote by Albert Einstein, which I hadn't heard, and I thought it was very beautiful. He says, "A human being is part of the whole, called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings, as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. Nobody is able to achieve this completely, but the striving for such achievement is in itself part of the liberation and a foundation for inner security." Go Einstein. He knew what was up. There's so much to all of this, right? I feel so deeply moved by the type of celebrations and questionings and fearless steps towards facing our pasts that a lot of people are embarking on right now as a path towards stepping away from separation and into interconnection, recognizing that certain things might come up that are uncomfortable or that are not going to feel smooth and that will need some repair, obviously, and some reconciliation. But I think we have to start the conversation and not be afraid of it. So that is what I am vowing to do today and keep stepping down that path. So that is all I'm going to say about the gate of continuity in that larger context of Indigenous Peoples Day. And I just learned that November is Indigenous Peoples month. So just keep it ongoing. Like I said, it doesn't have to be a singular day at all, because it's such an important piece of our culture right now, is reconnecting to that line, that thread into the past, so that it can weave a blanket of the future. And moving on a little bit to Thursday, where we have a full moon in Aries, which is in the gate of growth, or known as increase in the I Ching. This is gate 42. So that is sitting across the sky from the sun in gate 32. We'll have the third of 4 consecutive supermoons in a row, which is the Aries full moon in the gate of growth. And it is the closest full moon of 2024, closest moon to the Earth, making it the largest and thus the superest of moons. So it's also, if it was like a couple of degrees off, it would have been eclipsed by the Earth's shadow. It would have been another lunar eclipse, but because we're just leaving the Aries Libra axis, the nodal axis, and moving into Virgo Pisces. So this is very close to eclipse energy, so it's not really letting us off the hook from eclipse season quite yet, but we're officially out of eclipse season. And so it's definitely still a potent full moon, though, I will say that. And this moon is known as the Hunter's Moon. That's an Anglo-Saxon name and for this moon, because people in the Northern Hemisphere spent October preparing for the coming winter by hunting and preserving meats during this season of October. Other Indigenous names for this full moon after fall include the Drying Rice Moon, Falling Leaves Moon, and Freezing Moon. And in Europe, the Celts called it the seed fall moon to describe it, which feels accurate for this time of year, because I'm walking around and just seeing these beautiful splays of seeds coming out of plants. Just everything is desiccating and drying, and the seeds are falling out. And I've noticed it a lot more this year than I ever have, kind of the beauty in that seed fall. So welcome, seed fall moon. As I've mentioned before, full moons are like mirrors, where they reflect back the opposite energies from our current solar season. So as we're surrounded by the crunchy falling leaves and dying plants of late Libra season, the Aries full moon each year is a bright light that is reminding us of the time in late March and early April, when freshly sprouted seeds are pushing out of the earth and awakening to a new day, awakening to a new season. And this polarity reminds me of what we've been talking about with the gate of continuity, which is the grafting of a new sprout onto an old root. It's a cool time for this gate to be here, because we're in this full moon that is reminding us of the new sprouts of spring, right in the middle of fall when everything is starting to die. And, in fall, trees and plants are not spending energy on new upward growth, but instead they're conserving and sending their energy down toward the roots, and they're preserving and venerating what is down below and what has come before. So when we look to the botanical world, and I'm doing that all the time these days, because I've been studying an herbalism course, and it's really just beautiful to see that, kind of feels sad when all of the you see these flowers that are starting to just, droop and die, the last remaining flowers of the season. But knowing that as those do fall off and the seeds fall and the leaves fall and it starts to freeze and starts to get chillier and colder, that what's really happening is the energy is going down. The energy is going towards what has happened in the past, the growth of those roots, and it's kind of fortifying them and saying thank you for all that you've done. This isn't just about what's up above. And so we are in that energy of continuity and where the sun is, and then conversely the moon is on the other side of the sky in the gate of growth, which evokes Aries season sprouting energy. And Gate 42 believes that the future is bright with possibilities and uses that belief as fuel for bringing projects and dreams and goals into their full potential. So that is the energy of this new moon. It's an energetic Martian moon that can definitely, Aries has an association with a temper and hotness, and so it can definitely have that vibe where we're slowing down. The world seems to be kind of slowing down in certain ways around us, or dying, or returning to the earth. And then Aries is like, no, I still want to move forward. I want to get going. So there's always a dichotomy. There's like this polar opposite within full moons. And so just let that be this Thursday. Soak that in, see what it has to teach you, looking at continuity on one side and growth on the other side, and focusing on those words, and just venerating them both, giving them both reverence. So it's definitely a beautiful reflection. After an intense season of the eclipse and darkened moons, this bright full moon will reveal to us the beauty that lies in connecting our old roots to our new sprouts, and the depth of ancestral wisdom with the spark of life for future potentials. I'd say on this moon, a short meditation that you could repeat to yourself will be: we will not only thrive by recognizing our interdependence with other beings in this current moment, but also by actively recognizing our deep interdependence with the passage of time, with the past and the future. So Sunday into next week, this gate of continuity lasts through Saturday, and then Sunday we move into the gate of values, which is gate 50 in human design. And that is also the beginning of Scorpio season. Gate 50 is covering the cusp between Libra and Scorpio. And so it's known as the cauldron in the I Ching to tie into these witchy themes. So it's a very perfect entry to Scorpio season. So stay tuned next week for some spooky and underworldly deep dives. And have a beautiful Indigenous Peoples Day, a beautiful full moon in Aries this week. And I would love to hear from you, hear what you're doing to pay reverence to the land that you're on, or the land that you call home, or the land of your ancestors, and the roots that you identify with. I would love to hear about that for you. So comments are here down below, and you can always reach out at astrosomatics, astro.somatics, or Cycles of Time podcast on Instagram, and DM me there. And thanks so much for subscribing and sharing and being here in general. And I'll see you next week for the entry to Scorpio season. Have a beautiful, beautiful week. Bye.